It's the savvy side of 9 to 5. Listen.
It's not a lie if you believe it.
Laugh.
We had a little fun, because it's a very long day, you know.
And learn.
Negotiation. This is what you do in business.
This is The Focus Group with Tim Bennett.
All right, let's go already.
And John Nash.
Pucker up, Buttercup.
With a focus on career, the consumer culture, and marketing from an LGBT point of view. We're all business, except when we're not.
Welcome to The Focus Group. John Nash here with my good friend and co-host, Tim Bennett. Looking...
I don't know about this shirt, John. You said this was a vintage shirt.
Yeah, it's a
little stripy.
Classic, good stripe. Bold. It's bold. That's
bold?
the word I'm looking for. It's a bold shirt today.
I was going to do check again like you.
I'm glad you did not.
Okay.
Because we always usually coordinate this kind of, like accidentally, you'll come in with checks. I'll be wearing
checks.
Hey, welcome to the show. You can find us every week on YouTube, Facebook Live. Of course, if you're on Facebook, feel free to comment or call us here in the studio, 877-962-6846. We have Garrett taking your calls. He actually enjoys taking your calls. He likes the Focus Group caller. And there they are in the booth. We have John. John, show us your Mirror shirt. John's wearing a Star Trek.
What?
Mirror. It's Spock. One of my favorite episodes, The Alternate Universe. And we have Garrett doing our audio. Thank you, gentlemen. You can find us also, if it's just the audio portion of the show, iTunes, which is now called Apple Podcasts, right?
What do you got in your mouth?
I got one of your little Luden's cough drops.
Yeah, spit that out.
I'm not going to spit it out.
my
It's up in my
God.
throat. You can find us on
Chew, chew, chew.
SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and on the Reverie app. And, of course, you could find us on YouTube anytime as well.
Can you all hear that? We're laughing in the booth.
All right, it's gone. It's gone.
I thought you had a pebble in your mouth.
Yeah.
Talking Star Trek.
Or
Was
it's
it a
like-
moon rock?
Or it's like on the playground, if somebody you remember you used to play marbles as a kid?
Yeah.
And remember, if you're lucky, your dad or someone you knew got you the Steelies, which were ball bearings.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I forgot about those.
And I remember once, and this goes back to, you and I did not meet until high school, but we were in the same school district. And I remember once on the playground, I came across a kid that I knew whose mouth looked like a chipmunk. It was filled with and he was being tortured by somebody. He had to hold a mouthful of Steelies for 5 minutes.
Why?
I
Somebody
don't
made him
know.
do it?
He did something like on the playground, and he
The
had
big ones were called bolsters or something.
boulders
Glass
or
one. Bolster.
bolster. We didn't call him
Bolster.
that one.
What'd you call them?
We just
the big
there
glass
was a
ones.
name that we had for the big ones, but I don't remember. But most marbles were the little glass ones.
Marbles were a big deal.
Yeah, I remember getting new ones. That was a big thing when you got a new sack of marbles, and they were a lot of fun. Anyway, welcome to the show. Hey, last week I introduced people to an app called JobFlare, and some of you actually took the JobFlare challenge. In fact, one of our listeners in Alabama sent me a note, and it's Pat. And Pat, hello, and thank you for taking the JobFlare challenge. And Pat writes, "Hi guys, love your show. The JobFlare games were fun. The results even more so. Among the many and varied results, I currently work in a CPA office are a sales associate for Foot Locker, a truck driver for Tyson Foods." These are very specific things that JobFlare tells you. You could be Foot Locker, Tyson Foods. His favorite, though, a bilingual Japanese-English customer service associate.
Does he speak Japanese?
I don't know. Maybe it's time for a change, and it's from Pat in Seal, Alabama.
Another listener, Phil, on Facebook, had the same. He also played, and he liked the games. The games are fun.
The games are very fun, yeah.
Did you get a job recommendation?
I've gotten nothing yet. I've gotten nothing in my email asking me to look at anything, and I'm wondering what I did wrong. But you said I need to play more?
Yeah, I think you need to play more, and you need to get your score up. And I'm going to call bullshit on it. I think it's a way for one of the job site boards to just get more eyes on it.
And you said it
I
was...
think it was Indeed. I think might be the one.
okay.
So all of a sudden, I play the games, and they're fun. I could see we can get addicted. And then I got about 3 hours later, a recruiter had contacted me about a great opportunity in the area, and I could be a host at the brewery, local brewery. They're looking for a host to seat people at the brewery, Iron Hill Brewery. So I thought that was nice.
A host.
Host. That was what I was qualified for.
The funny thing about that comment is, or about that job idea is, Didn't you actually at one point look into doing a much higher level
Yeah,
job at a brewery?
it was a vice president of marketing at a brewery.
But you could be
And,
a host.
They ended up making a mistake and hiring somebody else. But other than that, I just laughed when I came in, and then I started doing some R&D on the JobFlare. I'm not sure. Well, I don't think I'll be continuing to play. I want to see what comes in for you because
I will say this, but when I'm opening the app now because I had
the games are math skill. There's deduction.
There's mental. It's broken into mental fitness, verbal ability, and math skills.
Yeah.
Now, strangely, the only good thing about JobFlare, the app, is that it mirrored my high school SAT scores in some ways. Dismal math score.
I was going to say, what was your math? 200.
Verbal scores. Math is. I'm down in the 60th percentile for all jobs, but for verbal, I'm up in the 90th percentile.
Wow.
So I was one of the kids in high school who I believe I got one of the lowest scores in math. I think you got a couple hundred points for signing your name.
Yeah.
Got one of the highest scores you could get for
verbal, one of the lowest in math. It's like me when I took the GMAT and fell asleep.
I love that story. You had flown in from Hawaii.
To Philadelphia.
You called me I think you called me
the
from
red eye.
Yeah, you called me from your office the next day. You're like, you're not going to believe this. But you started taking the test, and when your head lifted off the keyboard, when you woke up, it said timeout.
Yeah, well, the first thing was reading this essay about dinosaurs, which I couldn't have been less interested in. After having partied all week in Hawaii, why I took this and invested $900 because I took the course and everything.
Okay.
I'm still mad at myself. And then I hit the button, and so I got like a 0. I don't know, a 2. Oh, we'll send this to all the schools. Of course, nobody's knocked on the door for grad school for me yet. So much for that.
All right. So what caught your eye?
What caught your eye? Here's what Tim and John found.
So I was poking around. So for those of you who are fans of our show, we had a frequent guest, which we call a member of our focus group family, Jeff Yeager.
Cheapskate.
He was known as the ultimate cheapskate. He'd written a number of books about how to save money and how to retire wealthy. Was on the Today Show over 20 different times. Was on our show probably 8 to 10 times. And also was a spokesperson for AARP.
Had a series of
videos on how to save money. So he essentially made money by telling people how not to spend money. And
I love that. I like the way you. That was a good.
Well, I tried. I
made
tried.
money by telling people how not to spend it. Yeah.
And so I realized I haven't heard from him in a while.
Last you heard from him, you talked to me about it because that was the mystery surrounding.
So I hadn't heard from him, and so I started poking around, and I Googled he's off social media. So I thought, well, that's kind of weird. So I started poking around. I found this article. This was from late January, early February in the Washington Post, and the headline is, "This couple is actually leaving the country because of President Trump." So he has decided, he and his wife Denise. They're both retired. They decided that they keep talking about all these different people that said they were going to leave the country. People said it when George Bush was elected, and people said it when Trump was elected, that they were going to move elsewhere. So it says here, Yeager, a self-employed writer, and his wife plan to spend the coming year roaming the globe in search of a new home where they will live for 4 years or possibly 8, depending upon if Trump gets reelected. He calls it Trumping out. He said it's sort of like an extended political camp. So they visited all over the world. They liked Ireland, but it looks like they're going to settle on Croatia, which is one of the places you could live as an American quite inexpensively, as well as there's not a lot of paperwork. A lot of people say, let's go to Canada. They said the amount of paperwork to go to Canada is crazy. So just to think you're just going to pack up and move to Canada can't happen.
It's not a permanent resettlement?
No, he said by no means are we going to give up our U.S. residency or our citizenship. He said our citizenship. But he said, and so then they cited a couple of other celebrities that said they were going to leave if Trump got elected. Samuel L. Jackson was going to South Africa. Amy Schumer was going to Spain. Lena Dunham was going to Canada. And Cher said she was going to Jupiter. You could have joined her there.
Dun, dun.
So they said this was
You could have joined her there.
This was similar to all the talk when people said they were going to leave if George Bush was elected. And they said there was really only one noted case. It was Pierre Salinger, who was the press secretary for Lyndon Johnson. He moved to France.
That's right.
So they did this whole story. They're going to rent out their house or sell their house to get rid of all their worldly possessions. They said that they live right now on less than $40,000 a year. Their mortgage is paid off. They said they're one of these few people in the country that could actually do this. They have health care from her job. She's a retired health and physical education teacher. So they have Social Security. They have a small pension. They've saved money. So it allows him to do this. And he's a writer. He said, I can write anywhere and I can lecture and do work. And they live on less than $40,000 a year. When they travel, he wouldn't be fun to travel with. They spend less than $100 a day. And they usually stay in youth hostels. They try to pick up meals now and then. They use something called couchsurfing.com.
Let's go back to your expression when you said the word youth hostel.
Because in college, I stayed at a lot of those. And you have to get up in the morning and clean.
You just did this there's a little grimace that you made, like, youth hostel.
You know they smell.
I've never been in one.
Oh, my God. You haven't?
No.
There's one in Philly we used to stay at when I was at Marietta College for rowing, and we used to take it over, and there would be all these young European backpackers there, as well as us, and you had to get up in the morning and clean. And
What did you clean?
you had to dust the place, clean. You had to clean like it was a working thing. You paid $3 a night, but then you had to do work. You had to do chores in the morning.
Oh, no. My idea of a flea bag / youth hostel experience is a Holiday Inn or something.
Right. So, so the interesting thing is, so I decided I'm going to call Jeff, and I wanted Jeff to come on the show and talk to us about it, just 2 or 3 minutes while they're leaving. So they've put their house in the hands of a realtor. They're heading off to Eastern Europe, probably Croatia, he said. So I asked him, I sent him a note and said, John and I would love you to have you come on and talk about it. So here's the note he sent back. Hi, Tim. Good to hear from you, and I'm so glad to hear that you and John are back on air live again. You guys are terrific at what you do. I've decided not to do any additional interviews about our personal views and our plans during the era of Trump. I don't regret doing the original interview for the Washington Post, and I knew it would spark some controversy, but the level of vitriol the story generated when it got picked up by Breitbart and other conservative outlets was, frankly, a stay-awake-at-night frightening experience, which has led me to be much more vigilant in protecting my privacy. I hope you understand. Good luck, and hopefully our paths will cross again someday during saner times. So I started reading some of the comments, and they were scary and threatening, a lot of them. A lot of them, goodbye, don't come back. Some said, you should stay in the country and fight the good fight and fight against, reelecting somebody else you feel more in tune with. But he said that he was actually quite scared about what had transpired. And so he just said, I got off social media, I've stopped doing interviews, and we're just moving on. But they're packing up and leaving.
Well,
Did you do that?
No. And frankly, although I will say this, they're doing an extended holiday. They're leaving for a prescribed amount of time. It's not like I have a friend named Vince who
says he doesn't think they'll come back permanently, but they're not giving up their citizenship.
Okay. But I have a friend, when Bush was elected, my friend Vince in Boston was so upset that he applied to be a Canadian citizen. It took 1.5 years, and then he emigrated to Montreal, and that was that. Does he
still live there?
Yeah.
Does he like it?
Yeah, because for him and where he was at in life with their healthcare system and a couple other things, it made sense.
Moving to Chicago.
Well, I went to visit, and I love visiting our Canadian friends in the cities up there. It feels very compatible. But it was he did it more as a statement than anything else. Yeah. He just didn't want to be in the country that. Now I think that in hindsight he might have jumped the gun. Because he could have had Obama years, and then he could have done something for the Trump thing. But, wow. So I think they're just going away for a while. But if they don't ever really permanently come back, then it's,
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? Would you do it? And if you did do it, where would you go?
I don't know. I don't know where I'd go. I'm
with Amy Schumer, by the way.
Spain?
Oh, I think Spain or France. Actually, Spain. We learned that friends of ours, neighbors of ours, are going to celebrate their 50th anniversary on a trip from Madrid to Barcelona, and I had nothing but good things to say about the country.
But you know what? It's one thing to go visit
It's a different thing.
someplace. When you actually live there and you're there all the time and you have to make a go of it,
yeah.
it's a whole different story. Every place is great. I used to say that to friends in Chicago when I lived in Chicago. Love Chicago, love Chicago, love Chicago. I said, try living here in the dead of winter when it's 30 below and the wind's blowing.
Whipping off the lake.
And your car has to be plugged in because you don't have a garage and you're stuck in traffic all the time.
Trace and Christine.
Otherwise, it's beautiful.
Remember when Trace and Christine lived in France for a while when they were when he was working in Geneva? That's when they learned the way things get done. You know, it took a month to get an internet connection fixed, or sometimes the power. You know, they're all used to that over there. Things happening. Oh, the power went out. Well, you know, someday it will be fixed.
Il est dans la lune.
And you, yeah, vous êtes sur la lune. Oh, by the way, she would like to meet with you. We're actually quoting our old French. Tim had French and Spanish with Madame.
And I got in trouble a lot for changing
French.
words.
And you did, yes.
So,
But she remembers you, and she remembers me.
So what caught your eye?
Mine was very different, very short, and very page 6, which is not usually my forte. But page 6 is like, what is that, the New York Post? Guys, is that
Gossip.
the Post that does? It's a gossip column, yeah. And it caught my eye because just last week we ran, or was it? Yeah, last week, Tim had seen the new VW Atlas commercial, and they're a partner of ours here on the show. And it was a thing about a Irish grandmother who takes a cross-country trip to all the places she wanted to go and had her husband been alive. And at the end, they have an urn. I didn't notice the urn until the end, and I guess that's
she
his
took the dead
ashes,
grandfather with her.
and they dump him somewhere else. So it turns out that a local boy, and not just any old local boy,
Local New York boy.
local New Yorker, was cast as the dad in this VW Atlas spot, which John is playing down there in the corner. And his name is, I'm staring right at it, McNamee. Gerard McNamee, who actually is Irish, but his main claim to fame is that he is the manager and operates Webster Hall. And you know Webster Hall, right?
Right, but what is it for people who are outside
Webster
of the
Hall
bubble here?
is a venue in the East Village known for like top bands. But when I first lived in the city, that's where you had to go see the Pet Shop Boys, Erasure. That's where you had to go to see all the new wave bands. Great concerts. It's a wonderful concert space. Lots of fun. I've seen tons of bands there. So it's kind of funny that he moonlights as an actor when he's not managing Webster Hall, and he got cast. And he said, "I guess I fit the bill." Whose own parents were born in Ireland. He said, "I'm single," so his mother laughed when he suddenly gave her grandkids from the you know how there's kids in the car. Right. Now I watched it a couple times. He's in it a little bit here and there, but the thing that caught my eye about this one, beyond the fact that it's a Webster Hall guy, the 24-day shoot rambled across 7 states and was possibly the most expensive commercial VW ever produced.
Wow.
So, we talk to our marketing friends down in VW all the time, and we do our road trips. Tim and I do many road trips. Our road trips are not the most expensive that they ever do, right?
No, but now we'll have to raise the price.
But I think we're more appealing. We go to destinations people want to go to, like on our upcoming road trip from Chattanooga. We're going to pick up. Is it an Atlas we're going to pick up?
You're going to take an Atlas. You're going to go to Dollywood.
And we're going to go to Graceland. And you're
going to go to Oak Ridge to the nuclear laboratory, and then head home.
And maybe, thanks to Don, we'll have lunch with a bunch of rocket scientists.
Speaking of Don, looks like he's calling in here. Don, you're correcting yourself. Was I right about Cassini?
No, you are not.
What's up?
No, you were not right about Cassini. Correction. When I said that Cassini was going to die this week, actually it's doing a series of high orbital maneuvers, successively going lower and lower, and it won't actually end its mission until the 15th of September, when it will hit the atmosphere and not come out.
That long? I'm kind of surprised by that. I thought, Don, I'm like you. I kind of thought this was end time for the probe.
Well, what I got wrong is that it's doing these very sharp, high elliptical rotations into the atmosphere and out into the rings, back and forth, collecting particle samples. And that maneuver continues until the ellipse gets so long that it slams into the atmosphere. The resistance kills the momentum and it crashes.
It's like a Delta flight.
No, United flight. They punch back.
Spirit, JetBlue, whatever.
Name your airline,
American.
right?
Hey, Taz Smith, keep it up.
Thank you, Don. Thanks for
Don.
calling today, and thanks for correcting that. So you know what he means by so the planets that so it's going to do highly
Loop-de-loops.
Yeah, but it's going to every time it comes into the low part, it's going to graze the atmosphere and get slower and slower until eventually it comes in and it gets
Boom.
trapped by the planet's gravity and atmosphere. Yeah. So that's what caught my eye was Gerard McNamee
Cool.
of our own Webster Hall, one of my favorite concert spaces, and the other favorite concert space, and you've enjoyed it too. You've seen concerts here, Hammerstein Ballroom.
Yes, I love Hammerstein.
I saw Grace Jones there a while ago, and then we all saw the Pet Shop Boys. That's when Bob met the Pet Shop Boys and didn't know what to say. His favorite band. He's like, you can never have too many hats, gloves, and shoes.
So, business birthday.
Everyone does celebrity birthday greetings, but the Focus Group is the only show in the universe that celebrates business birthdays.
This one is for our friend Paul in Mass, particularly. So happy birthday to Alden Joseph Brown. This Thursday, he'll be 60. He was born on May 11th. You know him as Peter North. And he's a Canadian pornographic actor, director, dancer, producer, and so forth. He's endowed with some very desirable traits from our creator. He's 5'10", 10 and a half, 190. You can check him out at peternorth.com. He's
I got the height and the weight and the other. Okay, got
He's
it.
from Nova Scotia, Canada, originally. He picked his name. Well, so he was at a party. He was modeling some athletic wear at a private party in Los Angeles, and some man slipped him a card and said, I'd like to talk to you. And he ends up doing pornographic movies. He started out doing male-to-male porno, over 2,500 male films. And then he's done...
2,500
Oh, I'm sorry. He's done over 20. He's been in over 25
total films.
2588. 2,588. He starred in 21
a lot of sex.
gay porn movies.
How many years has he been doing this?
He was known as Matt Sterling, one of the top stars out there. So he appeared in over 2,000 adult films. He directed 70. But he also then, you need a brand extension. So he did toys and the protein supplements and accessories, lotions, potions, and all this stuff. And he was very popular. I don't know if you've seen any of his movies, John. There's one particular I like called Black and White that I've seen. But he really wanted to break in.
No, I cannot claim to have seen Black and White. And I'm doing some math. How many years has he been doing this?
Well, he stopped now. He's now producing and so forth. He stopped he was 98, between 98 and 2007.
Okay. So let's just, all right, 2007, 98. So he's 9 years in the industry, let's say, right?
At least. Started in 84, did a little bit, but he went from gay to straight.
2875 movies divided by 9 years. He has to, that's being filmed to have sex 319 times a year.
Right. Well,
Almost every day.
Well, there's different scenes. And he actually got in a fight with someone from the mafia. They threatened to cut off his unit because he had bottomed. When things get bad, then you turn to bottom. And so he became the submissive role. But he didn't want it leaked that it was him, and they were going to leak the film. He said no. So somebody by the name of Speedy and Gallo showed up with a knife. They were going to take care of him. And
this is the world you walk into, right?
So he really wanted to break into mainstream Hollywood, but the Hollywood execs thought that it'd be too much of a stretch. And hard for the public to swallow.
No pun intended. Pun intended, right?
As a straight actor. So happy birthday. Can you believe he's 60?
60.
Happy birthday, Peter North.
For a time in his life, between a 9 and 10 year period of his life, he was having sex 319 times a year.
So, John, it was one of the top adult movies of all time.
Black and White?
No.
What was it called?
The Bigger, the Better. He was Matt Sterling, 1984.
I've heard of that one. I didn't see it. But
you'll have to maybe, I don't know, does Deep Discount have it?
I'll have to do a little Googling and searching to see if they do. And speaking of that segue, a partner of ours here on the Focus Group is Deep Discount. And we invite you to visit our website, focusgroupradio.com, and scroll down on the right-hand side. When you see the Deep Discount link, click on through and begin to do what I do, which is called Alice Through the Looking Glass or Going Down the Rabbit Hole. Once I start clicking around, especially when I'm given things like, okay, so this week, Deep Discount wants you to check out their sale on TV drama and miniseries. This is a wide open canvas for me, man, because there's a lot of stuff that I haven't seen. So I'm clicking around And I personally picked from this. John's going to put up some of the pages in a minute here. So it's dramas and miniseries, and I chose, and they've got everything. Have you seen the new Fargo yet?
No, I haven't, but I've heard good things about it.
Good things, but I haven't watched it. But they have Fargo there. But I looked personally, and I actually put down. There's a Paul Giamatti, and the guy that played the one that was turned in Homeland. Remember season 1? He was the
redhead.
The redhead, yeah. They have a show called Billions, which I'd like to actually check out. I think Billions is in its second season right now. Got good reviews, but again, it's about a hedge fund guy. It's a money kind of thing. There it is, Billions, and those Paul Giamatti and the other guy. And then I'm scrolling through, and what do I see? I think it was on page 4 or 5 of the TV drama and miniseries sale pages. Little House on the Prairie. And the Little House on the Prairie, look at that. It comes in its own little soddy. That's the soddy. That's the house they had. That's where the Ingalls lived, on the prairie.
You want that?
I love Little House. And here is the Little House. And John's going to play a clip, 30 seconds, from Little House on the Prairie. This is Laura Ingalls having a fight with Nellie Oleson. And this would be the Little House equivalent of bringing a gun to a knife fight. This is how bad it got in Little House land.
Laura Ingalls, you stop that. Apple and dumpling.
That's a comeback.
Watch how we send it in. Stop. You have it your way every single day, Nellie. Well, today I want to play Uncle John. Ring around the rosy.
Ring around the rosy.
Uncle John. You want to fight? I'll fight. You want to play? We're playing Uncle John.
That's that. Hey, those are.
Well, I'll have to put that on my Christmas list.
Those are fighting words from little Laura Ingalls to Nellie Oleson. We're going to play Uncle John. I have no idea what the game is, by the way.
No, I picked something a bit more adult. I'm a huge fan of Seinfeld, so when I was clicking through, have you watched Curb Your Enthusiasm?
I've seen a couple episodes. I do need to delve into it. Mary Alicia loved that show.
So Mary Alicia turned me on to it, and it is, so Curb Your Enthusiasm, they're actually going to be a new season coming out, but if you like Seinfeld, this is a bit more edgier, and it's...
Larry David.
Larry David writes it, and there's profanity in it, meaning language, but it's used perfectly.
Got it.
And if you haven't seen some of the episodes, you just click it on it. If you love Seinfeld, you'll love this 10 times more. So I put Curb Your Enthusiasm on my list.
That's your pick for the mini. That's a deep discount sale on TV drama and miniseries. And then there's always a new release at deep discount. And this week, another classic movie, a favorite of mine. It's The Godfather's 45th anniversary edition on DVD and Blu-ray. I can't say enough about The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2. It's a stretch for anybody to say they're not two of the best movies ever made. I mean, I could tune in any point. We know what's going on. We've seen the movie so many times. I love it. And I bet the 45th anniversary edition, it looks fantastic.
You can get it for me. I've never seen it.
Really?
No.
You've never seen The Godfather?
Nope. I know it's a lot of people's favorite movie. I've never seen it.
So I picked a clip from The Godfather. A lot of the movies at deep discount have little previews you can click on. They had one for The Godfather on their site, and was Michael talking to his dad. But the one I picked is a classic scene where they knock somebody off and they have some baked goods in the car they can't forget.
Yeah, Rock, what would you do?
No, me, nothing. It wasn't me.
It's gotta be him, man.
Hey, pull over, will you? I gotta take a leak.
Look at how it's set up. They're in Jersey. It's the Statue of Liberty. It's the back of the Statue of Liberty. They're in this
It's like a wheat field.
It's like a wetlands.
I can't believe it's 45 years.
45 years. I know. And last week was Saturday Night Fever, and that was 40 years.
Did you ever pee on the side of the road, John?
In desperation, yeah.
So what's going on now?
Someone just got it. 3 shots. There we go.
Huh. I guess
Now watch this.
Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.
Leave the gun, take the cannoli.
And look at how he carries the box. He makes sure the camera sees it. It's held really high.
Well, the cannolis are important.
Take care of those cannolis. Okay, so that is Deep Discounts sales this week.
So the best thing to do is for you to head over to focusgroupradio.com, click on the Deep Discount icon that we have there. That way we get credit for all that you purchase, which is great. So be able to watch what you want to watch when you want to watch it. Garrett?
Thanks, Deep Discount.
There you go. So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to show you this interstitial about VW and USA Cycling, and then we've got Ed Salvato joining us to talk about the latest book he's involved with for LGBT tourism. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
Brought to you by Volkswagen. Visit VW.com to learn more.
Anybody who asks, you tell them you race BMX, they're like, oh, you do backflips? It's not that at all. That's not what we do. We're basically a motocross race on kids' bikes.
I love it. I just feel like it's made me who I am. I can't picture a day without riding my bike. It's like a day without brushing your teeth. Like, you just gotta do it,
BMX is definitely an adrenaline junkie, aggressive sport. You're out there with 7 other people. There's no lines or boundaries. There's contact, there's big jumps, high speeds.
We are hitting 40 miles an hour at the bottom of the hill, and you're jumping a 40-foot gap. It's scary enough by yourself, but you have 7 other people around you.
This is a contact sport. When you see us on TV, you're gonna see people hitting each other in the turns or even blatantly taking each other out. You could be leading the whole time and make one mistake and the race is over. You could start when you're 2 years old and upwards of over 60. I know a couple of old dads or grandpas out here racing cruiser, and they just do it, they love it.
Definitely a wide variety family sport. A lot of people love doing it with their family.
I can't even explain the feeling, just sitting in the gate at practice. I got one daughter on this side, I got my other daughter on my left side. It's amazing. It's awesome. I mean, you could ride until you're 75.
Are you going to be riding when you're 75?
Oh, I hope so.
There's just so much passion that goes into this sport. BMX means that you can be who you want to be, and you can be a champion on your bike.
Focus on the savvy side of 9 to 5 with the Focus Group.
Try, really try.
Listen, laugh, and learn with Tim and John.
I never try anything. I just do it.
Hey, welcome back to the Focus Group. John Nash with Tim Bennett, and we are joined now by a good friend of ours who is an author. You're actually so many things, and I'm going to let you tell everybody who you are, but it's Ed Salvato, who's the co-author of the Handbook, a new book out that we were just, actually, Tim and I were just looking through this at lunch. It's the Handbook of LGBT Tourism and Hospitality, a guide for business practice. So it's basically a best practice book for people in the industry.
Yes, correct.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, Ed, because you're a lot of things.
Yes, I'm a lot of things. I'll leave some of them out probably. So Ed Salvato, my full-time day job is editor-in-chief of Man About World, which is a gay travel magazine, digital mobile app-based magazine. So you'd have to download it to your device, your tablet, or your smartphone. And I always joke that there's no print. It's not really online. It's not in print, so we don't kill any trees in the production of the magazine. Though I realize we kill trees to promote it, so it's okay. Just less trees. So that's my kind of day job, and then my dear longtime friend Jeff Quarcino, who also has a full-time job himself, running citywide events in Philadelphia, and I collaborated on this book. It's the second book. He wrote one 7 or 8 years ago. That was a little bit more 101. This is a little bit more of a master's degree. I can get into that a little bit later. So it was a labor of about 2.5 years.
Now, don't leave out the fact that for all of you that are watching and listening, if you guys happen to remember, Out and About was an incredible newsletter that was run by David Alport for a while.
David Alport and Billy Colber, my current business partner.
And Billy Colber was with Man About World, and it was a really great resource for LGBT travel and destinations. Particularly because they would be very stringent about granting the palm tree.
Correct, yeah.
You got 5 palms, you got 3 palms. But it was kind of like one of those things where once you guys had looked at a place, you could say to yourself, this is a destination I can feel comfortable in. I like the accommodations. There's plenty to do and dine. And then that was taken over by
Planet
Out, and that's when, and then eventually that became.
Very interesting story of that, but very briefly, Planet Out took over. We acquired Out and About for its travel content, and then it merged with Gay.com. That company raised a lot of money, went public and raised a lot of money, and then bought Liberty Media, which was Advocate, Out and Out Traveler, and then got jettisoned Out and About. But I was editor-in-chief of Out and About, then editor-in-chief of Out Traveler, which might
still is.
some of it. It's a sort of age range specific, but some of your your viewers may know that. And then that company didn't do so well during the economic crisis, and it was scooped up by Here Media, which continues to publish Out and Advocate, but not Out Travel, just the website now. It doesn't exist in print anymore.
So I bring that up only because you have extensively been a voice and a point of reference and a point of education in LGBT travel.
Yes, thank you. I have always had as my focus, so to speak, the consumer perspective. So a lot of publications, take ads and then, suddenly you see articles about the advertiser, We're really careful about that. We always thought about the subscriber first. We, in fact, didn't have advertising Out and About for years. So we've always been about the consumer. So our publication now is very similar. We think about the consumer. So you're not going to find a lot of the typical luxury products that everyone sort of talks about because they're the big advertisers in the space. We really try to focus on what we think our readers would love, but also really importantly, and this is so critical, is LGBT travel safety. In 73,
I think more than ever now. Right?
More than ever now, especially even in our country. I guess.
Will you take advertising?
Of course. We ads don't really work for us. We produce our own content editorially, but we produce content for our partners. And it's a different kind of situation where New Orleans will come to us or West Hollywood or Thailand and say, hey, we want to create a really great guide. You guys know the voice of your community. You know what we should cover. So we get to be, even though it's sponsored content, we get to still have our editorial.
Look, I have no problem with sponsored content.
Hey.
If it gives you something and it's valuable and it's well done.
Hey, someone has to pay for content, and consumers don't want to do it. So
we grew up with mobile masterpiece theater. I'm used to that.
So in this book that you co-authored with Jeff, what is it more? When John and I were looking through it, we were deciding: is it a guide? Is it a textbook? Is it? It's chock full of information.
Yeah.
But what do you want the takeaway to be?
Sure. What it's not a travel guide for consumers. Although I think consumers would find it interesting to know how the industry works. But it's really a guide for business practice for those in the hospitality and tourism industries who are interested in the LGBT segment. And also for educators, because we collaborated with Temple University to create discussion guidelines at the end of each of the 6 chapters. And this is meant for, we hope and pray, because we think it's such great best practices, that it ends up in tourism practices. So young people, our leaders of tomorrow, understand really well with good research and a good foundation what the LGBT segment's all about. So it's meant to be kind of really predominantly 2 things: a guide for business practice and an educator's guide. And we hope it gets picked up in curriculum.
I was just going to say, it sounds like it
required reading, yes,
to be in a curriculum.
Yeah.
So I think of LGBT, I think companies, cities, destinations have done a nice job, or a pretty good job, with the G and the L.
Sure.
Do you address I saw some chapters about B and T in here. So how has that evolved in all your experience with travel? Is trying to attract the trans customer
It's a new phenomenon. Yeah. So just stepping a teeny bit back. So when people say, well, yeah, we do LGBT marketing, we're interested in the LGBT segment. To me, that kind of says they're interested in sending a signal to the market that they're all welcoming. They're welcoming to gay people. And sort of in a bigger way, a little bit of a signal to millennials who really care about their brothers and sisters who are gay, and they sort of say, well, if they're going to accept my gay brothers and sisters, then they're going to accept me. And it's also it is just a big signal in the market. But when you're talking about real marketing, like getting heads in beds, getting, they say, butts in seats in air, selling tickets or selling events or selling destinations, people really have to focus on markets. And of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender niches or markets, the most obvious one, and the one that kind of produced the lowest hanging fruit, I'll just say it, and the one that has produced the most return has been the gay male market, and then also the lesbian market. But you see really people focus on the dual income, no kids segment. Yeah. It's huge. Yeah. Now, no one's talking about bi, but we have a small chapter in there. Bisexual people, and to a certain extent, when they're with same-sex partners, they can, you can market them as gay. When they're going with heterosexuals, then you reach them as straight. So, not so much. Tel Aviv is launching its Pride with a theme bisexual travel. It's very rare that there's anything about bisexual.
Right.
Trans is very interesting. They're a community that, by and large, travel's not joyful for, in a sense. Their IDs may not match their gender presentation. They may have difficulty internationally traveling. They may have to take a bus because it's cheaper. They're economically disadvantaged.
Well, this goes to the safety thing, too.
And also safety thing. We're very careful. We don't pretend to know that much. I mean, we're starting to learn a little bit more about the transgender market. Florida, Fort Lauderdale is doing one of the only initiatives I've seen, which is transgender. They're hosting a conference. They're doing some outreach. And so you're seeing that a little bit more. And we talk about it a little bit in the book, again, about safety and about, so you think about that as no one's really going after that market in a sense because it's kind of complicated and the return might be a little bit lower, but it's a really important segment to know about.
Niche within a niche.
Well, there's also, if you think about LGBT, gay, what does that really mean? Like older or younger, guys with kids, women with family, there's...
Well, because women and men were marketed to very differently.
We're as diverse as the straight market. And much smaller. So you really have to kind of pick your niche of a niche. Yeah.
So in a best practices scenario, someone going through the book, and we're talking to Ed Salvato, who's the co-author of Handbook of LGBT Tourism and Hospitality. This actually takes a reality thing when I'm approaching the desk at the hotel and I'm checking in with my husband.
Right.
And if I go back to the first time we traveled together in 1980-something in Las Vegas, and the guy quizzically wondering if we needed 2 beds and then if I said 1 king, you get that kind of look. Right. So nowadays, I think that the training of staff, and this is what your book probably and definitely deals with, that's no longer a point of confusion, but I guess the assumption the desk agent just makes is whatever the person wants, but maybe they don't even suggest something.
You'd be surprised at, at Man About World, we're in that other hat, we do LGBT sensitivity training, and we had to really talk through that, and because the marketers and the sophisticated executives in the C-suite, they all know that, what you're saying, but on the ground, I mean, it really has to be transmitted to all customer-facing operations and interactions that, what LGBT means. And if you have 2 men together, don't make any assumptions. The solution is kind of simple to your thing. It still happens, believe it or not, whether it's on cruise ships or even hotels. In the U.S., it still happens. Much less so. You wouldn't expect it at a Marriott because they have brilliant training or 4 Seasons or, that kind of thing because the customer's always right no matter what. But it does still happen, and it really comes down to training and getting that. So when we pick up these books and they start marketing, I was like, oh, let's collect the dollars. But then you don't realize that in the operationalizing of that,
there's work.
Very different. There's a lot of work.
What destinations right now are doing a good job reaching the LGBT consumer, in your opinion?
It's funny that that those things come and go because budgets change, and sometimes you have a dedicated staff, and sometimes you don't. But Fort Lauderdale is just absolutely brilliant. It's so
fairly consistent.
For years. They're the only destination I want to say that has a full-time LGBT director. His name is Richard Gray. He's really interested in the transgender market. They just integrated transgender models into their mainstream advertising. I mean, they do some really amazing things. So they're consistent. Their budget for this we talk about this in the book. It's not just like put an ad in a newspaper and wait for the return on investment and they get disappointed and walk away. It's 3 years. We always say kind of 3 years.
Get disappointed, walk away.
Right.
I put an ad in the paper.
We had an ad, nobody came.
Exactly, and you hear this. So maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on your thing. Philadelphia did a brilliant job. They went from nothing to top 10 LGBT.
Well, they're not doing much now.
Well, that's exactly right. Jeff kind of walked away from that, and then they had a position, but that kind of disappeared. And I think they're trying to build that back.
Vegas seems to have disappeared a little bit too, or is that my imagination?
It's a very good question. It's typically through the hotels, and it's odd in a sense because Vegas has such a big budget. We wish they would do a little bit of marketing, but
one of the points in your book, actually, you talk about the importance of social and blogs.
Yeah.
And if you look at the 10, there's a list of 10 steps for successful marketing, and I think number 6 or 7 or 8 was, in fact, engaging blogs. That's what Vegas is doing now. They pop up in certain LGBT blogs, and it says paid,
right,
or it's sponsored content. I'm not sure that has the impact of some of the, and for those of you who pick up the book, there's a section in the middle of glossy color photos of ads that have been well done ads, and Vegas has had some of them.
Beautiful.
And those actually, I wonder, like, you have to be consistent, you have to be in market, and you have to spend something, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Invest. I mean,
And that's
time.
Lauderdale.
That's Lauderdale. Oh, and Lauderdale, Philly. Montreal came out swinging back in the day, but they really haven't done much. They were the ones who started that blog influencer practice
Really?
like 10
Okay.
years ago. They were really ahead of the curve. Since Tanya was there, Tanya Churchmuch was their full-time person. She kind of left, and I think it diminished a little teeny bit. Illinois. The state of Illinois, it's very rare that entire states get into this. Their Republican governor was very supportive of the efforts of Illinois. I'm invited out there next week on a press trip, and this guy Corey Joby, he's fantastic. And also, of course, Chicago is they just hired a new person, Michelle Revuelta, and they're going to get, I think, a little bit back.
Well, you talk about that in the book too, that the importance of leadership, because if there's not a senior person that's behind the program, right? Whether they're straight or gay ally, or that it's not going to happen. And we saw that, John and I, all the work we did at Subaru. As soon as one of the champions leaves, the whole thing will just.
Well, it slows down. The budget dries up, and and then the consumer doesn't rattle the cage and say, "Where'd all this great stuff go?"
Yeah.
But on the destination front, there are destinations that don't have to advertise.
Right.
Example would be Lauderdale. Actually, is a binary thing. There's a great community down there already.
Mm-hmm.
They choose to continue to promote the destination as a welcoming, cool spot. P-Town, everybody knows P-Town. It's almost like word of mouth marketing.
Well, New York, you don't have to, right? New York City.
New York doesn't really.
I would disagree. I should talk about New York too, because we're doing a big project for them in the lead up to World Pride. You'd be surprised. I mean, San Francisco saw this a number of years ago, where they're like, "Oh, we don't have to advertise. We're gay." Consumers have a lot more options now, and there are other destinations. St. Pete just hosted the IGLTA. Toronto's hosting it next year. Like, these people are kind of going after the market. And, if I'm deciding between Montreal and Toronto, and I say, well, they're hosting this huge thing, like, maybe that sways me over. It's hard to measure, of course.
Yes.
17 clicks, then you book your travel. Like, where did your click come from? But so I would disagree with that respectfully. I think that destinations do not market sufficiently, and NYC is stepping up to it. It's about content. You'd think that, they're gay from the top down in a sense, but they just don't have the bandwidth to do it. So they hired Man About World to help them across all their operations lead LGBT, whether it's content, conventions, research. We're doing a lot for them. And they're smart because they're talking about the future. They're talking about a much more international audience now. LGBT people from Europe are maybe in a weird way 10 or 15 years behind us in terms of traveling as gay. And then there's also the millennials who are looking for that signal. Oh, New York they're pushing for the gay market. They must be cool.
Well, the cool factor.
But I'm going to just go back to your previous point about the internal champion. I really encourage organizations to institutionalize the LGBT effort with a position, like an actual LGBT marketing
one that they have to fund
and think about,
hire for,
task.
Maintain, task. Yeah, exactly.
We want to thank you for joining us.
You're very welcome.
If you can let our listeners know about where they can find Man About World, where they could find your book.
Of course. You can find Man About World on in the App Store or on Google Play, and please, if you can find the book on Amazon. It's apparently running out, so we're very excited about that. They'll restock it. And Jeff and I are available. Whether anybody wants to talk to an expert or take a hard look at their destination, we're both available.
Well, congratulations! It's the book was up here on the screen. It's the Handbook of LGBT Tourism and Hospitality by Jeff Guarasino and Ed Salvato, friends of ours here on the Focus Group.
This is Ed.
I showed up.
I want you to come back. Well, he's in Philly like me. Yeah. I want you to come back and talk about Illinois. That fascinates me.
Happily.
So
actually, I've already mentally I've ticked off a few things for Ed's return visit.
So stay with us. If you're thinking about traveling overseas, we've got a great little video coming up next for a destination that was probably not on your list. And then we've got Dr. Jude Miller Burke joining us to talk about her latest book that she wrote about how childhood adversity could affect your career in a positive way. So stay with us. We'll be right back after this cruise line video.
Brought to you by Volkswagen. Visit VW.com to learn more.
是一个游轮，作为一个旅游项目的话，它应该在一些娱乐上、餐饮上或者更多的一些消费上，应该再加强一下。
Now back to the focus group with Tim and John.
Because he has a lot of chutzpah.
An entertaining look at the world of business.
Heads are spinning, heads are spinning.
Listen, laugh, and learn.
I am not gay. I never have been gay.
That's my voice.
Yeah.
He's like, whoa.
Hey, welcome back to the focus group. John Nash here with my good friend and co-host Tim Bennett, and sitting to my right, or your left. I always do this.
Joining the conversation.
Joining the conversation is Jude Miller Burke, Ph.D. and author of The Adversity Advantage: Turn Your Childhood Hardship into Career and Life Success. This is a fascinating book, and Tim and I have a lot of questions for Jude, and she's so many things, actually. She's got extensive corporate experience in dealing with employees and getting the best out of your employee culture. She works with management. She consults. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
I did a total thumbnail sketch of your extensive career. So why don't you tell us about...
Oh, that's great. And I appreciate being on the show. So thank you. I worked at Honeywell for 10 years as an employee assistant psychologist. And then I worked at United Healthcare as VP of Operations for the Optum subsidiary. I've been doing executive coaching, leadership assessments for another 15 years. And at one point, I was actually in the nonprofit world doing crisis intervention services.
Honeywell... You were a staff
employee assistant psychologist.
They could use you again, from what I understand.
Yes. Well, many corporations can, and it was interesting.
Many corporations can, yeah.
I came into Honeywell in the late 1980s, and so they had recovering alcoholics who were helping other people that wanted to recover. But they hadn't had graduate-level psychologists before. Gosh. So it was quite interesting, and it was my first taste of serious adversity in the workplace. It was a very male-dominated company. There were very few women in higher-up positions, and in many ways, a kind and gentle culture, but at the same time, it also could become harsh.
As a complete sidebar, when I saw Honeywell, we have a good friend that works at Honeywell, which is struggling still with the same issue that you bring up about male-dominated workplace issues and male-female situations with career. Is that how this led you? So tell us about the adversity advantage and how, because I'm curious as to whether all your work informed this book or what the impetus was for the book.
Well, I think the impetus is that I had moved from Minneapolis, Minnesota, kind of outside of Minneapolis, though a rural area, to Scottsdale, Arizona. And so the lawns were groomed, manicured, the cars were beautiful, the homes were beautiful. And I had been working as a domestic violence therapist and also in the nonprofit industry in a crisis center. I was like, I know there are troubles here. They're just really very well covered up. So over a cup of coffee and a glass of wine.
That is classic.
There's problems here in Stepford Whiteville.
Describing the geography.
The geography was fascinating to me. The
right?
facade, yes. It's a very superficial culture. You know, I have made a wonderful network of friends there, and I have family there, and professional colleagues too. But I was really struck by over a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, people would tell me about the child abuse they experienced. And they had gone on to achieve great self-made millionaire or multi-million-dollar status, the men and the women. And
so when you say child abuse, like what? Is it physical abuse or verbal or?
Physical and emotional, verbal abuse, sometimes intellectual abuse. And then they also, 40% of them that I studied, so eventually then over a cup of coffee, a glass of wine,
right,
people were telling me their stories. And so I decided to do a study because I thought this was fascinating because my parents didn't have the opportunity to go to college. They were 18 when they got married. They had 5 kids, Polish Catholic family, boom, boom, boom. It was hard. Everything I did was hard. Paying for all my degrees myself, every job I had. There was no one to provide any guidance. So I thought if I can provide a roadmap for people to help people so it's not as difficult for them, I want to do that. So I did a scientific research study with Dr. Mark Attridge, and I had worked with him at United Healthcare, and we had 310 people, men and women, respond, and to our surprise, well, first of all, we got tons of great information on what leads to
They're also
success.
high earners, though. They were in the study. They had to have $250,000 a year income.
They didn't
right?
have to.
But that's who you ended up talking
Yes,
to.
and in my first book, they were all self-made millionaires, and my publisher wanted a book about women, and so that was my first book.
And that's this one here, folks. It's called The Millionaire Mystique.
But I didn't intend it at all to be about money. And in some ways it's relevant, in some ways it's not relevant at all. But of course that piques people's curiosity. But
So just to interrupt, and I'm famous for it.
that's fine.
That's a good determining thing. We often couple success with money. But success could mean you're a successful person, and that means you have patterns that lead you to have good relationships with people, you're a good decision maker, you're responsible, and that doesn't necessarily have to hook into have $1 million in the bank. It means you're moving through life successfully. Is that how you determine this
Definitely.
as well?
And what was interesting is that most of these people reported higher than the average level of life satisfaction. So we use standardized measures, of course, as you do with a scientific study. And most of these people had not only experienced a lot of childhood adversity, 60% of them came from poverty, experienced child abuse, witnessed domestic violence, and you know how hard that is on children, or had an alcoholic or substance abusing family member. So that's pretty much 1 out of every 2 employees that comes into work is carrying that basic template
You're
with
saying
them into work.
50% of
Yes.
of a workforce is
Right.
bringing all that train car baggage, right?
Right. So you can imagine a little boy who was maybe abused by his mother and all of a sudden has a female boss, or a little girl who is abused by her father and all of a sudden has a male boss, or a woman who's experienced witnessed domestic violence and then goes on business trips, where it's just she and one other person. So all of these triggers happen to us at work, and it can be something as slight as someone reaches over your shoulder, to touch your computer screen, and you feel them right there and they're just a little too close, and then all of a sudden you have a trigger. So what my book does is it takes you through identifying what your triggers are. First of all, identifying what you experienced as a child, because most people don't want to admit it.
But so as I read that, my big question was, so many times you hear about if you came from a house where there was an alcoholic or there was abuse, you followed that pattern, you bring that with you. Do you find that happens? Because I often wonder whether you can correct that, or is that just something that happens to you because of your environment? Can you change it?
Yes, many people have broken the cycle. Okay. And the quotes that I receive from people and the heart-rending stories that are in the book. So my first book is more an academic book, and I did a lot of academic presentations. This one are people's true stories, and their identities are protected. But it talks about how they really became a student of life. So they witnessed terrible communication skills, for instance, where an argument would be like a dish flying across the room, or something getting broken, or people screaming and yelling.
That's one way to make a point. Right?
All of a sudden, they're in the workplace, and there's conflict. And so many of them realized very quickly that they couldn't act that way at work, even though I have heard some computers hit the wall at different companies I've worked at. But, you get reined in pretty quickly for something like that. And so people become students. They become students of communication. They become students of a conflict negotiation model. And so these are people who really had to study different facets of their own growth, similar to myself, to overcome childhood adversity.
But that you just hit on one big thing, and that's an awareness by the individual that there is, in fact, this built-in pattern. They might not even be aware of it, right?
Very true. And I'm sure there are some gender differences there. The men, and I found this very fascinating, it was important to me to write a book for men also, because my first book, the publisher wanted it more about
women. For women, millionaire women,
So it was really part of my legacy that I wanted to write a book for men and women. Just as many men as women reported experiencing childhood abuse and witnessing domestic violence. So it's still a hidden issue. Now, the women reported more specifically the consequences. They were more clear about, I have self-esteem problems, I experience shame, I've had more divorces. But I think the men just weren't quite there yet. But I have many men's stories in the book.
And you said a lot of people they all recalled a turning point.
Right.
That kind of the light bulb went on.
That
and I wondered, I had a side note on there because I wondered about, even though it seems to be more acceptable now, particularly with our audience, an awful lot of people that may hide their, whether they're gay or lesbian at work, for instance, and does that affect them until they actually come to grips with that? If you're bringing that to the workplace and hiding it, is that also one of these issues that would that fall into the same category of the
Right.
adversity, or is that something totally different?
I think that is connected, but I also think political astuteness is something that's very critical to success and social networking, but being able to read the landscape of the situations you're going into.
Right.
So, of course, you wouldn't want to go into a homophobic culture and then announce that you're gay.
Right.
Not good idea. That wouldn't be good self-protection. So you really need to assess each situation to decide.
So that's perfect then, because that's where that says, okay, what you remember from childhood for survival, you bring into the workplace and
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And to jump off from what Tim was just, one of the areas of the book deals with these five key personality traits that you observed. I'm not going to say it's almost universal, but it was a very broad swath of the people you talked to and researched. I was fascinated by this: openness and creativity,
Very important.
agreeableness and flexibility, conscientiousness, resilience, and core self-evaluation, which is what
Awareness,
we talked
right,
about.
self-awareness.
Core self-evaluation, awareness, openness, and the book we're discussing is The Adversity Advantage: Turn Your Childhood Hardship into Career and Life Success. So I hear adversity, and then I see one of the big personality traits is openness, or two of them: openness, creativity, agreeableness, and flexibility. That doesn't sound actually like someone coming from an adverse background. That's just what struck me. It was like, wow, that's a surprising 180
Right.
from.
And one of the things that isn't on the notes that you have is a low level of neuroticism. So
Oh no, Tim! Don't even tell.
this
Okay.
group, of course, has
A low
higher
level of-
worry. They have more sensitive.
She just.
They're
John,
very.
Gosh darn! Did you have to say?
I'm sorry.
neuroticism?
the John T. Nash Guide is what we're going to call that.
Well, initials T.
It is a continuum. We're all on that continuum somewhere.
Are you serious though? So they would have those really great functioning things, but also be kind of practically, oh my God, I can't go.
Right. They learn survival skills growing up. So, take that example of living with domestic violence or child abuse and having a high cortisol level because you're really stressed out. You have that fight or flight response and all the hormones in your body and all those stress chemicals in your system. It actually changes the template of how your brain works. And so you're bringing that into work. Or maybe even in high school, you realize you can't be throwing temper tantrums like people do at home, right? Maybe get suspended from school or kicked out of school. So these people learn along the way that they can't replicate what they saw at home. So they become students of communication and of life in general.
Is that innate though? Are they aware they're doing that when they're becoming students of that behavior?
Well, I think companies and colleges and high schools rein us all in and kind of mold our behavior somewhat. The big companies like Honeywell and United Healthcare have human resources departments. So
You can't do that. Yeah. Was this hard to write? Because it seemed to me as I was reading through all the notes that I don't want to say it'd be sad, but child abuse is such a heavy topic.
it is.
And obviously you were trained, you're a licensed psychologist, so you're used to it and you're used to hearing the stories. But for somebody that might not be that familiar with it, if they got your book, is it presented in a way that is empathetic, or is it more
clinical?
Yeah.
No, it's very.
That's the neurotic part of me.
It's very empathetic in that I really wanted to tell heart-rending stories to kind of grab people. But each one of the people that I interviewed who told me their stories gave advice. Some people lost their jobs in very high-level positions, very painful after many, many years of working in a CEO position. Some of them were just got out of domestic violence situations. In fact, there's one man I interviewed in the book who just had left a marriage where he was being physically abused.
By who?
His spouse.
His spouse?
Yeah.
A wife?
Yeah.
That happens.
Yeah.
It happens.
And I saw that at Honeywell too.
Wow.
And it's really difficult for the man because here he is, you know, there's all the societal
Yeah,
expectations.
the culture does a great job of boxing that personality in, right? From
Do they all land on their feet?
All of them.
And that goes back to being able to manage the adversity that they had from when they were little, right?
Thread of advice that you said after you interviewed, they would often give advice. Was there a consistent piece of advice that these people would often offer?
I think one of the things is they all became more resilient. So they had survival skills, and they were hard-won survival skills that they then turned into positives at work. Many of the people said things like, after what I grew up with, I was determined that no one would ever experience what I experienced that was in my life.
Wow.
I became very clear on my values, and I wanted to lead a values-driven life. And so they have very clear values on how they want to treat their children and how they want to treat their grandchildren. So resilience, pride for what they survived, sensitivity and compassion for the underdog.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are
empathy.
Empathy, very empathic.
So what do you do for fun?
I have a new bike.
You have a new bike. Oh, no, he's a
It's not like your bike, I'm sure. It's a beach cruiser.
Oh, a beach cruiser.
Yeah, a kayak. I just bought a new kayak.
My sister and husband love kayaking.
I love it too.
Kayaking kind of freaks me out if you do it if you're tied in. I always think I'm going to be the one that flips. And
then you flip right back over.
But I know you flip back
I
up.
did that once. Don't do whitewater anymore.
One other question I have for you is there's obviously a spectrum of people in adversity, and I love the fact that most land on their feet, and people are very optimistic. But did you meet people who, for them, the sole goal was simply to be proud that they had survival skills and that those did not evolve into further skill sets? Just, I can survive? Because that feels a little, I don't know.
Like a person hasn't done their work.
Yeah.
The book outlines the steps you need to do to really improve your life. The self-reflection, maybe seeking a trauma recovery therapist, seeking out services with your employee assistance program. EMDR is a great benefit for people who experience childhood adversity. And you go into a meditative state with the help of a trained therapist, and you interweave positive solutions to what you experienced as a child. And the relief you can feel is just tremendous relief. So my book really lays out, like, what did you experience and how can you recover from this? And these are all the recommendations from the people who have survived and thrived. They're happy.
Yeah, that's the big takeaway here is when you read some of this, it's amazing how positive the impact of a bad event could be if you, in fact, internalize it and grow from it correctly.
Yes, but I do want to say that there's nothing like, and I can almost spot people now, there's nothing like growing up in a family where the parents are focused on you to meet your
Support
needs
you.
as opposed to the child focusing on the parents to meet their needs or adapt to the stress that's going on.
Children become the adult, right?
So well said.
Children become the adults. Yes, that's
How
true.
often does that happen? Because there's no manual that pops out with the baby, right? All these there's no big book that says chapter 1. This is what you start with. Everybody's different.
And how many parents are telling their little kids their problems? That's backwards.
Oh yeah.
So
it's close to home.
This might be too personal, but had you had the same sort of experiences?
I did. I mentioned I've paid for every college degree and worked 3 jobs.
As we did, John.
Yes. Yeah. And my
3 jobs, and while your friends are backpacking of Europe, it's like,
Yeah,
no, I've got
right,
to.
yeah.
I want to go to school. I need to pay for it.
Yes, exactly.
When we were talking about having you on, and we read the synopsis and we started to delve into the book, I said to Tim at lunch just today, I said, this is partly us, because when we hit a certain age, it was you have your driver's license, but you can't go anywhere until you pay for your own insurance. You got to get a job.
They need a car.
And you need a car. And we both put ourselves through school, and that was through a combination of work study, actual jobs, student loans. And
I drove a forklift. John made widgets.
I made widgets at a factory. And then, and I think that, and sometimes people say, like, we look back on it and we're like, I don't think we look at the success aspect, but we do see people who struggle, and we wonder, were they challenged in their youth, and not necessarily in a bad way, but did they have to overcome a challenge? Did they have to learn? You used to only hire people that went away to college.
Yeah.
Like a distance. Timmy, when he was hiring at Subaru.
Well, because I was hiring people that would have to travel by themselves on weekends to very remote areas, and I thought, and it was all these were young, somewhat entry-level jobs, But I found that people who had gone away to college, some distance from home where they couldn't get right back to the little nest, survived better because they could figure it out. Something happens, something doesn't show up, something goes the wrong way. They were more capable, or they were more capable of figuring it out.
And that's a good distinction. I mean, that's the kind of adversity all kids should experience, you know, a feeling here or there, or trouble with school, so they can learn how to develop some resilience and some hardiness. But this kind of trauma is very different from that.
Yes, yeah,
I wouldn't
I
wish
agree.
this kind of trauma on anyone.
anybody.
So I want to emphasize the book really has positive input, like how to recover, how to make your life better, how to be successful at work.
Well, and how can people find it?
Amazon.
Amazon. So it's
You have it right up there on the screen.
It's Dr. Jude Miller Burke, and she's a licensed psychologist, executive coach, and employee performance expert. You're also an expert on leadership, resiliency, and pathways to success, and we appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you very much.
So be sure to grab the book at Amazon or where good books are sold. Is that bookstore?
I think Gail King said on CBS
did she
this morning
say?
today, she goes, wherever you choose to buy your books.
Wherever you choose to buy your books.
That's good.
I thought I'm going to copy
Do you have a website people can find you at?
Right, JudeMillerBurke.com.
JudeMillerBurke.com. That's easy. And you're on Facebook because we linked you.
Yes, that's true.
Okay, good. Hey, we want to thank you for joining the focus group today. We want to thank Dr. Burke, who joined us, as well as Ed Salvato. We want to thank our friends at Deep Discount, and as well as our friends at Volkswagen of America. There's lots of choices out there for you to drive vehicles, so be sure to go to VW.com and check them out and all the great cars they have to offer. Please don't text and drive. Stay alive.
That's your pet peeve.
Stay alive.
I agree with you. I totally agree with you.
Stay alive. Heaven can wait, right, John? That's probably a movie you can get at Deep Discount.
It's a great movie.
But so everyone have a great week. Thanks for joining us, and don't text and drive.
Don't text and drive.
Take care.
It's The Focus Group with Tim Bennett and John Nash. Formerly on Sirius XM Satellite Radio and now accessible on all platforms. Subscribe, like, and rate us on your platform of choice. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com.